Mm-hmm.
At that time, the European tribes were fighting each other for the lands of the indigenous people of the Americas. Okay, and so essentially, the Africans won the fight in Haiti, but they had to fight three European tribes, right? At that time, for instance, like if you look up in the map, there's Jamaica, which was colonized by Great Britain, and then you have Cuba right next to us, which is colonized by the Spanish, and then you have to the other side of us, you have the other Spanish space, which was Santo Domingo, right? With me?
Gotcha.
Below us was like Colombia, Ecuador, and what's like Venezuela, Spanish, right? Remember, I told you the Spanish were the biggest power at that point in time in history. And then the Northern Europeans were fighting to unseat the Spanish, the British, and the French, and the Portuguese. The Portuguese started bringing in Africans in Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
Today, the most black people on on the Americas is in Brazil.
Mm.
A nation with that is made up of more of Africans only. 99% of Haiti's population is African.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Dominican Republic did not come into being until about 1840 something, 42 or 44. This is after the Haitian Revolution. So when the revolution started, our ancestors strategized to divide and conquer the Europeans fighting for power. So they didn't really take us for much. They just thought we were animals, um, inferior, and so on, right? So they never even imagined or conceived that we could beat them in combat because that's what they were taught by the Jesuits. That's what they believed, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And if you believe, sometimes you could make it a reality for your lifetime. That's what they believe until they met Haiti's founding father, Jean Jacques
Mm-hmm.
Dessalines, the greatest hero who ever lived. 1791, a man, enslaved man out of Jamaica, was deported to Haiti by the sold to Haiti, whatever, and his name was Bookman. The revolution started there, 1791,
Mm-hmm.
and then so when that revolution started in 1791, the Spanish were looking at us fighting the French and just kind of waiting to see if they could just pick up the pieces, like get the French out of their faces, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let us bleed, right? So Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines and the warrior leaders made a deal with the Spanish. They gave them guns and they helped them kick the French out of Haiti. But you know the European, right? He's
Right.
always about conquest and lies. So our ancestors knew that they were going to try to take over Haiti. So guess what? We fought them and took over the entire island. And so when that war was won,
Mm-hmm.
I mean that so they kept fighting back and forth. Then the English decided, oh my goodness, this island. Remember, Haiti was the biggest money maker for France. Okay, it made more money for France than the 13 colonies did for England. The 13 American colonies made for England. Okay, it was called the Pearl of the Antilles by the terrorists French.
Mm-hmm.
So the war went on for 13 years. We kept allying with different European powers who thought that we were stupid enough to believe what they were saying, but we didn't. Whenever we finished fighting with one, we fought him to get them out. Eventually, in I think it was 1797, there was a treaty called the Treaty of Basel,
Mm-hmm.
where we went back to fighting with the French on behalf of the French so we can get rid of the Spanish at some point. And that Treaty of Basel is really important because most Dominicans today believe that they're Spanish or that somehow Haitians invaded their country. It wasn't that way. We we by the Treaty of Basel,
Mm-hmm.
the Spanish gave up all rights to their part of the island to France by the BASEL 1797, I believe. We won against the French in 1804. So when we did, that means France had, excuse me, the Spain had given up. So we own everything that the French owned in Haiti. That meant the Dominican Republic. So Jean-Jacques Dessalines and the
Mm-hmm.
warriors of the Haitian Revolution freed the entire island, not just this little tiny half. And
Mm-hmm.
then when we freed the entire island, we sent warriors to South America, and we freed 5 Latin American countries, including Colombia, Ecuador, Venezuela, and so on. The Bolivia. But you know the European can never forgive us, and they never stop. Like they never stop. To this day, they haven't stopped trying to reverse the Haitian Revolution. So once we had beaten them, Napoleon had to sell the Louisiana territory to Jefferson. Okay, which doubled the size of states that are in the United States and like more than quadrupled the size of the United States. Remember, there was only the 13 states. They
Right.
doubled it to like 15 or more whole and part states, doubled it, but quadrupled because remember how big the Louisiana territory is
Right.
in terms of, okay. So that's really the story of the Dominican Republic. In 14, I think I'm going to get these dates a little wrong. It's between 1842 and 1844. I think 1842, there was a big earthquake.
Mm-hmm.
The European, both the French and the Spanish, were trying to come back and take the islands, the parts they lost to black people, which they thought it was an insult.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So there was an earthquake in Haiti. They used that earthquake to start a revolution, not really start a revolution in the Spanish part, and
Right.
say that this Spanish part has separated. And then like the people of that part hadn't even known what was going on when the Europeans declared Dominican Republic existed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it became the Dominican Republic, because at that same time, like I said, we were fighting a couple of things. There was the French was trying to come back on their side, and the mulatto sons of France who actually killed Jean-Jacques Dessalines, they agreed to stop France from coming back. They
Mm-hmm.
agreed to pay what they call the independence debt, but it was an extortion debt.
Wow.
So but the debt was being paid for the entire island, remember? And then so the people who were the mulatto presidents made a deal with their fathers in France because they were more Eurocentric after they killed Jean-Jacques Dessalines. They made a deal that we, the black masses, would have to pay back for France losing us as property. It's called the independence debt. It took Haiti 122 years to pay it back. It wasn't paid back until 1947. That's why Haiti is so poor, right? It's financial colonialism,
Mm-hmm.
right? But this mulatto sons of France who had their fathers in Europe and Eurocentric couldn't care less that the black slaves, which they used to own, now had to pay back and go back into sharecropping, basically, to pay France. And France didn't have to have, it was a new slavery without having to pay for housing or food for the enslaved, right?